What is there left about the Holocaust to be investigated? What stones have not been unturned? Like, this is the most weasel answer of weasel answers to such a basic question that every single person who've ever opened up a history book should be able to answer. The German government posed the Jewish question and then answered it with genocide and murder. This is his changed messaging. This is the scarier option. I don't really know how to approach this story. So right now there's huge protests going on in Iran because a woman was beaten to death for not wearing a hijab. And that's something I want to do a full segment on and talk about it, because there's a lot of protests particularly happening in the Kurdish regions of the country, as we can see here, because she was beaten to death. 20, I believe the woman was in her 20s. And anyway, I wanted to cover something else that is kind of, you know, like news that's not directly tied to this, but is about the Iranian government. So 60 Minutes actually interviewed an Iranian government official and asked them a whole host of questions. And one of the answers that the president of Iran gave to these questions, because this was the president, was around the Holocaust. Now, why any reporter would need to ask the Iranian government their official position on the Holocaust is strange. I've never seen the president of the United States been asked, do you think the Holocaust happened? Because it's kind of, you know, a given that they're going to say yes. But that was the question. The question was, do you believe that the Holocaust happened? And he basically says, I don't know. Because his real answer is most likely no, or I can't signal support for the idea that the Holocaust happened because I'm so unbelievably anti-Semitic. Let's play the clip. Like, this is the most weasel answer of weasel answers to such a basic question that every single person who've ever opened up a history book should be able to answer. Let's play it.
Do you believe the Holocaust happened? That 6 million Jews were slaughtered?
Look, historical events should be investigated by researchers and historians. There are some signs that it happened. If so, they should allow it to be investigated and researched.
So you're not sure? I'm getting that. You're not sure. What about Israel's right to exist?
You see, the people of Palestine are the reality. This is the right of the people of Palestine who are forced to leave their houses and motherland. The Americans are supporting this false regime there to take root and be established there.
So the second question is very minimally related to the first question. But let's talk about that first answer. About him wanting it to be investigated. What is there to be investigated? What is there left about the Holocaust to be investigated? What stones have not been unturned that he wants to be unturned? It is one of the most documented historical genocides in human history, with whole museums existing that I've been to. My girlfriend used to work in Washington, D.C. The Holocaust Museum in D.C., Holocaust museums across the world that exist solely to retell the story of survivors and to document what happened. There's mountains of physical evidence, documented paperwork, testimony by those who committed the Holocaust and the genocide against the Jews and those who survived it. Tons of biological evidence as bodies were recovered, physical evidence at these facilities and the existence of these facilities. Not to mention the years of documented evidence of the German government's descent into a more and more hostile position towards the Jewish community, and Adolf Hitler's very openly anti-Semitic beliefs and his government's very openly anti-Semitic beliefs. The German government posed the Jewish question and then answered it with genocide and murder. So there's nothing more to be investigated. So when he says like, oh, you know, there is some evidence that points towards it happening, all the evidence points towards it's happening. He says this as if there's contrary evidence that exists. And remember, this is him talking to a Western reporter. This isn't him talking to a domestic news outlet. I talk often about how domestic Russian propaganda plays very different than Russia Today in the United States. And the reason why is that the Russian government understands that different audiences are going to be more receptive to different messages. The domestic Russian audience are going to be much more receptive to the dehumanization of Ukrainians than the international audience, which is going to be more receptive to the arguments about neo-Nazism taking over the country and the Russian liberator, right? Not that they don't play those tunes domestically as well. Where this guy seems to either lost the track that like, oh, this is an international reporter, so I should probably change my messaging, or this is his changed messaging. This is the scarier option. That when he said, you know, there's some evidence that it happened, this is his moderate response. That there's a response to this question that is a lot less moderate that he maybe would have held out depending upon who he's talking to. Meaning there could have been a response to this question that would have been like, what Holocaust? Of course it didn't happen. It's a big Jewish lie. And that is more terrifying than even the answer that he gave. But yeah, the Iranian government, Iranian press, like Press TV is something that's Iranian sponsored television, right? That has often hosted Holocaust deniers, has pushed narratives that the Jews were not killed in the Holocaust and that it's a big fraud, that it's fake. So if Russian-sponsored state TV, not Russian-sponsored, Iranian-sponsored state TV has pushed this before on Press TV, and they're willing to say this in the past, it's not that surprising that even the president of Iran is willing to say this to a face of an American reporter. I think I'm mostly surprised by how blunt he was. And how, I mean, he was kind of wiggly, but just like, yeah, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, who knows, you know, investigate it. What do you mean investigate it? It happened like 80 years ago. What is there left to be investigated? That would have been a great follow-up question. And that's what I don't like about this interview, is it feels like they just kind of move on, almost like they didn't know how to parse the question, even though they asked it and they had it prepared as a question. They should have followed up. Just like, what still needs to be investigated? Because it just feels like he basically said, oh, it's just like a question to leave up to the historians. But then you ask him about Palestinian rights, which is a legitimate concern, a legitimate issue, and he has a lengthy answer about how Zionism and yada, yada, yada. He can get very specific when he talks about the evils of Zionism, but he can't get very specific when he talks about the horrors of the Holocaust, and maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, who knows, who cares? Let the historians do some more investigating. Like, could you imagine if this guy sent like an Iranian research team to Germany? They send them to Auschwitz, and there's like tour guides just standing there, you know, that guide people on tours to explain the Holocaust. And they come there with like brushes and microscopes and test tubes and a whole shebang. And they go there and they're like, hey, we're here to investigate. They're like, what? We're here to check things out, you know, just, you know, we heard that a Holocaust happened. I hope we weren't too late. Did we miss it? My goodness. What a backwards answer from such a backwards regime.